History in our part of the world has always been complicated, layered, and resistance, betrayal, hope, and a repeated cycle of war. The question of Eritrea's sovereignty is one of the most difficult chapters because it touches on colonial boundaries, Pan-African principles, and the deep wounds of Ethiopian-Eritrean relations. When Italians held Eritrea as a colony, their grip shaped the land and identity of its people, just as Ethiopia fought fearlessly, tirelessly, to remain independent from European colonization and free up Eritrea. Later, as the African Union was formed, its charter emphasized respect for colonial boundaries in order to preserve stability among nations. In that logic, Eritreans' right to sovereignty has been recognized. If that principle were broken, in Eritrea's case, then every border in Africa would be challenged, opening the door for fragmentation, and that would create chaos. At the same time, the Ethiopian heart has its own perspective. Ethiopia stood as the only African nation not colonized, carrying a legacy of independence that many African nations admired. To see Eritrea, once part of this larger Ethiopian history, walk away was felt by many as a wound. When the TPLF rose to power in Ethiopia and played a decisive role in allowing Eritrea's 1993 referendum, many Ethiopians saw this as an arrangement less about justice and more about political maneuvering. Some still believe the long-term TPLF agenda was to create a greater Tigray, with fertile lands taken from Amhara and Afar, and access to ports like Asab, and Massawa. Maps have circulated showing this imagined geography, though solid evidence remains elusive. Still, the rhetoric lives in the Ethiopian mind because the collaboration between EPLF and TPLF was real. And without TPLF's struggle alongside EPLF, Eritrea might not have achieved its liberation. These intertwined histories show how one liberation becomes another internal fracture. The aftermath has been disastrous for both people. Eritrea gained sovereignty, but its youth have fled in large numbers from a life of endless national service and lack of freedom. Yet, some Eritreans still cherish being sovereign, answering to no one, carrying pride even in hardship. Ethiopia, meanwhile, has become consumed by ethnic federalism, a system that divides its people by land and identity. In Ethiopia, no individual owns land in the full sense. Citizens may own the walls and roofs they build, but the ground belongs to the state. This has made land a tool of politics, a resource leased or sold to foreign powers, and a reason for ethnic-based displacement. Millions of Amharas, Gurages, and others have been massacred or forced out of Oromia, Benishangul Gumuz, and other regions. In Addis Ababa itself, the land belongs not to the people, but to the state. This system gives each ethnic elite dominance over its region, while others are treated as outsiders. This is a paradox when viewed alongside Eritrea, a sovereign state with firm borders, where life is harsh but identity is intact. versus a vast country with many nations inside it, where land is owned by none and everyone can be expelled in the name of ethnicity. One country is hard but sovereign, the other large but fragile. Both bleed, both lose their young, and both are trapped in cycle of war that stretch back even into colonial times, when Eritreans fought alongside Italians against Ethiopians, killing their own brothers. My name is Abebe Negash. I present to you a Eritrean perspective on this matter on behalf of Ethiopian hearts and African hearts. The world, the world order knows that these conflicts are not just local. If a precedent is set where an ethnic group within Ethiopia can successfully secede by force, then every African country built on colonial boundaries will face the same danger. Africa is home to more than 3,000 ethnic groups. If every group decides to form its own state, Africa would no longer be 54 nations, but over thousands, over 3,000 microstates, each vulnerable to resource grabs by global powers. It would be a new colonialism, not through armies, but through contracts, debt, and mining concessions. Today's superpowers would carve Africa into fragments, buying resources cheaply from desperate small states. The youth would die in wars that mean nothing, because in a materialistic world, life itself has become cheap. Corpses pile, mothers weep, and yet warriors march on as if death has no weight. This is the sickness of our humanity today. The Ethiopian example of land ownership makes the picture even darker. If people pay taxes for their roofs and walls, but not for the land, then the state itself shows disregard for human dignity. If the state can't sell land to Gulf states, China, or the West for short-term money, while displacing its own people, then who is protecting the soul of the nation? That's what's happening in Ethiopia today. Eritrea may be isolated, thanks to the past leaders of Ethiopia. But at least the land belongs to Eritreans. Ethiopia is open but unprotected, and its people are turned into tenants of their own home. The situation demands great minds. Listen to me, please. Not more soldiers. No one will be the winner. Africans must sit together and decide if they will continue this self-destruction or build a path of peace and cooperation. The United Nations is weak as we know it, and it has no means to enforce its own rules we all accept to abide by. The African Union is weakened too, as it's being used as a proxy, and its job is to make sure colonial boundaries are respected. The global economy is struggling. And in such times, the search for resources grows aggressive. Africa is the final frontier of resource wealth. If Africans remain divided, fighting each other, they will lose everything. The land will be not theirs. It will be rented, sold, or taken. The winner of today's war will be the loser of tomorrow's deal, until nothing is left. The Ethiopian-Eritrean conflict is therefore not just about sovereignty, borders, or ports. It is a mirror of Africa's largest problem: the clash between colonial boundaries and ethnic identities, between sovereignty and survival, between material power and human dignity. The questions raised are provocative but necessary. Does Eritrea's sovereignty, rooted in colonial boundaries, give it eternal legitimacy even if its people suffer? Does Ethiopia's ethnic federalism, rooted in the language of self-rule, justify displacing millions and deny true ownership of land? If Eritrea fought for independence, but now its youth flee, what would the meaning of the sacrifice? If Ethiopia fights to remain whole, but its people are treated as outsiders in their own country, what is the meaning of unity? The truth is that both nations have suffered for nearly a century, even before that, colonial times. Directly and indirectly, both people have killed one another, sometimes in the name of colonial powers, sometimes in the name of liberation, sometimes in the name of survival. And for what? The cycle has no end unless peace is chosen. As a truth seeker, I stand with both Eritreans and Ethiopians in the suffering, but I cannot stand with the endless war. I'm fed up. This is my conclusion. I am Ababa Nagash on behalf of Ethiopian Hearts for Peace and African Hearts for Peace. Despite their differences, Ethiopia and Eritrea must recognize that their destinies are intertwined. Preparing for war now is another historical error. The land cannot be more valuable than the people who live in it. Sovereignty cannot be more precious than the lives of children who die in war. Ethnic pride cannot be more sacred than human dignity. My recommendation is simple. Truth must be spoken, grievances must be acknowledged, and dialogue must replace violence. Let Eritrea keep its sovereignty, let Ethiopia heal its wounds, and let both recognize that survival depends not on fighting, but on cooperation. If any Eritrean or Ethiopian wishes to add perspectives that I have not mentioned here, I welcome them. Peace is not the silence of guns, folks, but the agreement of hearts. Let us choose the path before all is lost. And I thank you very much.